Debt. The question is, are these signs that the economy is about to take a turn? We're going to find out what it means on the other side. You're watching Velshi and Rule live on MSNBC.
I want you to listen to this real quick because you missed it.
If you're a random person in society, they might not get it.
Yes,
you chose not to be
Listen
a
to what's
random
coming up.
person in society.
This
So
is
you
going to be
wanted
interesting
to be the president of
to
the United States of America's fixer.
my viewers.
And by the way,
Please listen.
Even now, in the last few months, Michael Cohen is traipsing around New York City at some of the most famous restaurants, so it's hardly like he's not wagging it out there.
Cigar bars.
Okay. Coming up next, we're talking about your money. A new data
Money,
shows
money,
lots
money.
of Americans are overdoing it, shouldering a record amount of debt. The question is, are these signs that the economy is about to take a turn? We're going to find out what it means on the other side. You're watching Velshi and Rule live on MSNBC.
Let's go forward.
We are going to start. To Velshi Rule.
Too far, right there.
We are going to.
Sorry about that.
Perspective. Get your favorite MSN.
Here we go. Right here. Let's watch
Welcome
this.
back to Velshi Rule.
Thank you.
It's time
Appreciate
now
this.
to take a look at your money. New numbers show many Americans are in dangerous financial positions, despite the president's constant boast of the greatest economy ever, including just a short time ago in the Oval Office, saying the economy is doing fantastic. But according to a study released by the New York Federal Reserve, more than 7 million Americans are behind on their car loan payments by 90 days or more. That is 1 million more people than the previous high back in 2010, as the country was beginning to recover from the greatest recession we've seen. And the volume of those loans is higher than ever, topping out at more than $584 billion worth of outstanding debt. If those loans begin to default, which happens at the 90-day delinquency mark, it could have a harsh effect on American workers. According to analysis done by Brookings Institution, almost 128 million of the 150 million American workers studied in a 2016 relied on their car or they carpooled to get to work. Losing that transportation method could cost some Americans their actual jobs, something that could then cascade through their personal lives. According to Bankrate.com, nearly a third of all Americans, that's 29%, have more credit card debt than they have in emergency savings. At least 18% of Americans.
Stop that just for a second. Did you hear what she just said? Let's back it up and let's listen to that one more time. This is statistics. These are based around facts. Stop right there.
Or they carpooled to get to work.
Now listen.
Losing that transportation method could cost some Americans their actual jobs.
Now, we already know that because people basically are living from paycheck to paycheck. But listen to this statement that she's fixing to make.
Something that could then cascade through their personal lives. According to Bankrate.com, nearly a third of all Americans, that's 29%.
29%. That's basically a quarter of the working class people that are working either on an hourly wage or a salary of some sort. Listen to the statistics.
Have more credit card debt than they have in emergency savings.
Have more credit card debt. This country is still maintaining itself off of borrowed money. There's no way that any country can stay self-sustainable for any length of time if they continue to do this again and again and again.
At least 18% of Americans have no emergency fund whatsoever.
Whatsoever. That means even if a tire blows out, they may not be able to make it to work by Monday. That means if the plumbing goes bad or the radiator goes bad on the automobile, that means if anything occurs in their life, they're basically have to take back seat. That is a very, very close margin of destruction. That is dangerous for any nation or country to be thriving or surviving in this way.
And the rate of credit card debt to emergency savings is higher than it has been in recent years. A perilous situation to be in as economic indicators are predicting a recession. And Allie, no one is saying it is the fault of the president that there could be a recession.
No.
This is where we are in the cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting to know, given that where the stock market is, given how low unemployment is, given that we've seen wages going up, given that we've got GDP growth, why it is we're seeing an increase in people have more credit card debt than savings and behind in their car loans. Let's bring in John Harwood to see what this actually means. John, we are all tea leaf people, right? We look at what's going on and say, is this a harbinger of something dangerous coming, or is it just another sign of the inequality that we've got in
A tale of two Americas, which we've had for years.
Yep.
I think both. Look, when we talk about how good the economy is, we're talking about a particular set of indicators, talking about growth, talking about what's happening to unemployment, what's happening to stock values, that sort of thing. But underneath that, we know, given the statistics you just cited, that a significant swath of Americans are simply not getting ahead and struggling to stay above water. The Federal Reserve also showed last year that 40% of the country could not come up with $400 if they had an emergency, like their car going on the fritz.
All right, I want to stop right there. I just heard a report, I think it was yesterday, to where Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, their minimum wage rate is at $12 and something an hour, and by 20 and 25, they plan on squeezing it in from $12 up to $15 an hour pertaining to their minimum wage bracket. Now, the last I looked at in the state of Tennessee, their minimum wage bracket does not even come close to the state of Kentucky. How come one state bordering another state, which basically has the same dynamics, the same culture, the same factories, the same type of rivers, the same type of people, the same type of churches, the same type of culture, is that much offset? Whenever I have made reference to the fact that the state of Tennessee is a illegally run state, I don't say that just briefly or casually. I mean that on lots of different levels, including the labor force money level. Let's please listen to this analyst that probably knows a whole lot more than what he's actually proclaiming that he knows. Let's listen.
Their credit cards were maxed out. They didn't have the cash. So it is a danger sign. And the further you get away from that financial crisis that we had in 2007, 8, 9, the more people get relaxed and take a little bit of risk. And now we're seeing some of that come back to bite them.
Okay.
And maybe bite all of us.
Right.
Back to the president's comments this morning, and they're not new. These numbers that we just talked about are stark contrast of what the president talked about today. Was a Gallup poll, which shows that nearly 70% of Americans think they will be better off financially next year at this time.
But both things can be true, right? Both things can be true. You could be okay and thinking it's getting better. You could be badly off and thinking it's getting better. So the two don't mean...
Yeah, you can be deceived. You can be bamboozled. And that's what's put us in the position that we're in right now. That so many people believed in all these fictitious lies. You know, all of a sudden they come up with this profit sharing. That's basically just a scam that Wall Street runs on people. And occasionally from time to time, once the pyramid gets so high, the main sharks basically take off the cream from the top, and then they head down Florida somewhere and live like kings and queens down there, living in big boats and yachts and maybe owning an island or two. And I mean, if the people just not wisen up to what has occurred here in the past, they're not going to wisen up towards what to do in the future. It's the saddest moment of history in America that I've ever seen. And yeah, you can blow smoke, and yeah, you can pull this bunny rabbit out of the hat, and you can make it look or give the appearance that, like Donald Trump, that everything is hunky-dory, that everybody's working. Okay, so they're working. But are they making any money? Are they putting any money back? So what? The dog is chasing after its tail. Is the dog going anywhere? Is the dog growing? Is the dog achieving? Is the dog becoming more successful in his achievements towards being able to prosper and grow and go forward? This has been a sick reality that has befallen the American people, especially since 2008, whenever the big bubble burst occurred, whenever everybody and their brothers' utilities pertaining to fuel that went up $4 or $5, some places $6 a gallon. And of course, bread went up, clothes went up, everything else went up. But then whenever the fuel went back down, like it is right now, it's probably the lowest that it's ever been. Once those prices on milk went up, they never did come back down. So where's the money going? Where's the profit going? Profit's going in the big guy's pocket. And there's no doubt the big guy, he made the bigger sacrifices towards signing the bottom line. Well, I'm going to build this building, and I'm going to pay this amount of insurance, and I'm going to pay this and pay that, and I'm going to be responsible for this amount of people. There's no doubt that he or she is going to have to make more than the common laborer. But at the same time, is it fair to the laborer that the laborer has to beg, borrow, or even steal just to be able to survive? And that's where we're at right now. Please listen to the rest of this. I felt like that my viewers really needed to listen to this.
The same thing, right, John?
Well, exactly right. And of course, Gallup earlier in January came out with a poll showing rising pessimism about the national economy. So people give different kinds of answers when they're talking about the nation's economy versus their own personal finances. But even in the poll that the president was citing, 69% of the people said that they think they're going to be better off a year from now. But you still had something in the range of 1 in 5 saying that they think they'll be worse off. And that speaks to the people at the bottom rungs of the ladder that we were talking about, who are squeezed and struggling to keep up. And that's what's driving a lot of the conversation in Democratic presidential politics about what are people going to do for them in terms of minimum wage, in terms of health care coverage, all of the things that people need to raise their families.
Address, if you're going to succeed and not live like poverty-stricken people that lives down in the hood somewhere, because they have chosen their lifestyles of being hooked on drugs or being hooked on alcohol or being hooked on this or hooked on that has drained all of their resources. But you got people out there that don't have those habits, that are still struggling to survive. And who's to blame for that? Our politics, our banking industry, the big conglomerates that's taken advantage of society the way that we have. And now we're at $21.5 trillion in debt. And now they're going to throw that burden back off onto the American people, the working class people. The system is broke. Just like I made mention today to Homeland Security up in Nashville, Tennessee. The way to fix the immigrant illegal status problem, I think, is to make it twice as hard on those that want to hire illegal immigrants that's undocumented. In other words, not just make a fine. You know, it hadn't been too long ago till ICE done a big sweep up here in Union City, Tennessee, and took out several hundred people that was working for Tyson and 2 or 3 other big factories, as well as 3 or 4 restaurants. But if you was to imply not only penalties to whoever hired these illegal, undocumented immigrants, regardless whether they was from Mexico or China or Canadians or Russians or whoever, but if you put steep penalties on them to the degree of possibly going to jail time, then is whenever you would see a turn of the magnitude towards the supply and demand, that the demand for the illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, would soon vanish and go away. Once more, we're supposed to have people in power in government that's supposed to be smart enough to figure this stuff out. They didn't want to figure it out. Either that or they was incapable of figuring it out. And now look at where we're at on a conservative level. We got over 11 million undocumented illegal immigrants over here in America. And if the truth be known, they're probably off at least half, maybe even a whole, pertaining to it being more like 15 or 20 or 25 million illegal, undocumented immigrants that's working here in America right now. I know for a fact I can go to Atlanta right now and find body shop after body shop after body shop that's being run by a bunch of Chinese and Japanese people. Or I can go down to Florida, down by Miami, and find ain't no telling how many chop shops that's being run right now by Cubans down there. Cubans. Illegal, undocumented, un-American, unspeaking English people. Even whenever I went into the Social Security office while I was working in Homestead, Florida, which is down below Miami, Florida, and had to take care of some problems with the Social Security Administration. It took me an hour to wait on somebody to come to the desk that could translate their language to the American language. That way I could communicate with the people working in a federal government facility towards understanding what was going on. And we got pockets like that all over America. You know, you can go down by Tucson, Arizona, and that's predominantly run down there by Mexicans. Mexican restaurants, Mexican hotels. And if the hotels ain't being run by Mexicans, you can come up this way, and 90% of them are being run by people from India with a little dot in between their eyes. So you can't tell me that this country hadn't already been taken over. Now, the next question remains is, what are we going to do about it?
John, when we think about the impact of these numbers, are they, could they be underlying causes of a slowdown? Do people start feeding off of this stuff? You start getting your car. I mean, in 90 days is when it becomes a problem, when you can't keep up on your car. Do we, you never know what
the result of a slowdown.
Or they're the result of a slowdown, yeah.
Well, I think both. I don't think we're likely to see a cascading effect of the kind that we saw
with houses in
2008, when you're talking about the big numbers involved in people's mortgages, and then security debts go unpaid, and then you have this.
I think it'd be worse. I think it'd be absolutely worse, because in 2008, you know, as I believe it was Bush, young Bush, was leaving office, had to borrow $775 billion from the Treasury Department to bail out 2 or 3 car institutions, 2 or 3 finance, real estate people, big real estate conglomerates, and almost all the banks had to be bailed out. And to this day, we still don't know where all the money went. But yet now, if the government would have gave every family at that time $1,000 rebate, some of the money would have been mishandled, misused. But if they'd have gave every household $1,000, that would have done the trick towards giving the economy a boost in the arm, towards everybody going out here buying new washers, new dryers, new TVs, new appliances, new cars. It would have got the economy back up and running again. But instead of the government taking care of the workforce, the government took care of the conglomerates. The conglomerates have been taken care of by the tax-paying dollars. Instead of the government taking care of the people that put the money in the Treasury Department to begin with, it keeps taking care of the crooks that are taking advantage of us, which in the essence makes the government a crook. Because now they're contributing to the problem. Instead of them being the solution to the problem, now they have become the problem. Because they're taking care of the wrong people. And now we look at these statistics, which is in reality form, pertaining to the working class, and we see where the whole fundamental cliff, the cliff that the working force is on, is within paycheck to paycheck. And we're talking about millions and millions of people that are that far behind. And if I'm not mistaken, this gentleman talks about student loans here in just in a second. Please listen to some more of this.
Potential default of major institutions. I think this is a smaller scale problem, but it's a real problem for them. And when you have an economy, a recovery, that's now 10 years in, it doesn't take a whole lot of misfortune to tip the balance and finally end that recovery. We know that the growth is slowing down now. Some people predict minimal growth in 2020 with Mark Zandi, the independent economist, thinks the chances are higher than 50-50 that we'll be in recession by the end of 2020. And statistics of this kind show some of the danger and could propel that forward.
But let's just stay for a moment on this auto loan debt, for example. Knowing that it's growing or it's coming, is there anything lawmakers can do? I mean, they're not in a position to say you're forgiven, but I'm just thinking back to the financial crisis. If August of 2008, suddenly the government woke up to the subprime crisis.
But the world is falling apart because of it here. The auto loans, it's a bad situation, but the worst that's going to happen is people will lose their cars, which is really serious for a whole lot of people in this country. But it doesn't have the cascading effect on the national and global economy that the housing crisis did. I think that was what
in theory, Congress could do something, but I wouldn't expect it. You know, we've had debates for a number of years about the growing scale of student loan debt and calls to do something about that. It's very difficult to get Congress to intercede on an event of this kind. It was very hard to get people mortgage relief in 2008, 2009.
Still controversial.
Yeah, so I wouldn't expect action on this, but I think it's definitely something that lawmakers are going to be watching and concerned about.
Yeah, and economists are going to be watching. John, thanks very much. John Harwood is CNBC's editor-at-large. Just the kind of thing that you don't want to be looking at 8 months from now, 10 months from now, saying, hi, that was the first signal.
But you can say that about everything.
Sure, yeah.
Hindsight.
It's 2020. All right, Vice President Pence is on the world stage in Poland right now for a conference on the Middle East.
Once more, the Americans are heading down a slippery slope, and the professionals know this. They can see this. Whenever you create a false identity that everybody is doing well, knowing that everybody is not doing well, it would be the same incidences as fake news or being bogus or artificial. It would be on the same level that if you was sick and you know that you was sick, real sick, let's say you the doctors had already declared you with stage 3 or stage 4 cancer. And you was going around telling everybody, oh, I'm fine, I feel great, I feel better than I ever have. Could never be better. You're only displaying a falsehood of what's in reality going on in your life. And to prevent from people being sideswiped, or to prevent people from being blindsided. That's the reason why the Windmill Ministries missions here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, continues to keep putting out material to the general public. It's because we want to alert the general public of these red signs, these pitfalls, that if the professional analysts can see them, if people like myself can see them, and if other people can see them, everybody needs to be aware of what is occurring and what is happening. I really and truly strongly believe that a week before Christmas in 2018, that's the reason why the federal government put out an advisory to its citizens to start preparing for a doomsday scenario by having at least 6 months of water, 6 months of food, and be properly prepared for something big that's going to occur. Now, they can call it an electrical improvised, whatever that they want to call it, towards the grids shutting down and all the satellites shutting down and U2 and electricity going off. They can call it an implosion by terrorism from within that's going to cause havoc. They can call it natural catastrophes pertaining to a great earthquake or a volcano or something else major that are hit as far as a tidal wave, either on the East Coast or the West Coast. They can call it whatever they want to call it. But the bottom line is this. They have failed us 3 or 4 administrations before the administration that's in power now have failed the American people, and they have set us a sail for a catastrophe that is now looming over not only the American people's heads, but it's also looming over Great Britain, and it's looming over in other parts of the world, basically all over the world. There's only a few places that is really doing really well, and of course China is one of those, but the bottom line is that the rest of the world is not doing so well, and as we're steadily slipping off into this slippery slope that others can see coming, that's the reason why the sharks up at Wall Street, once the pyramid gets so high, they sweep off the cream from the top. And they're only concerned about their self-endeavors. Once they wind up with 15, 20, 25, maybe $150 million, they head down to Florida and they buy them a little spread. They get them a big boat. And they do a lot of cocaine. And they drink a lot of beer. And they party hardy like there's no tomorrow. I know. I've lived down there with them several different times in the Florida region, regardless whether it be on the west side, the east side, or the south side. I know how they think and what they do down there in Florida. That's the reason why Florida is such of a liberal state. In other words, any and everything goes down there in Florida. from A to Z. Don't matter if you're a hippie or a yippie or a nerd or a drug addict or a rich man looking for a place to park his limo or his Mercedes or his limousine or his airplane. Any and everything goes down there in Florida. That's the reason why everybody pretty well gets along down there. Strip off all their clothes, walk around on the beaches, listen to the seagulls, while the rich man lives out the rest of his remaining life down there pertaining to the ball players, the lawyers, the politicians, the judges. It's really sickening if you're a true native to Florida, because so many people in Florida has been ridden from their own homeland. They have been driven out by the wealth and the corruption that has went down into there. There's no doubt Florida's got probably some of the nicest roads, nicest bridges, nicest hotels, nicest atmosphere that you can ever walk off into. But the average person that's out here working for minimum wage cannot afford the taxes, cannot afford the insurance, cannot afford the tolls to go up and down on those nice bridges and those nice roads. They're basically pushed out of their own atmosphere. And that's the reason why so many of them have to come to Tennessee or Kentucky or other places where the living is much cheaper. You know, they was talking about the taxes today pertaining to up in the New York area, up in Long Island and places. It's probably one of the most highest tax areas in the world, other than maybe Hollywood out in California. But whenever you have to cut a check at the end of the year for $7, $8, maybe $18,000, $22,000 just to pay for your taxes, how many people can do that? How many people do you know of that has that type of cash flow, unless they are working illegally under the table? How many people do you know of that can do that? Other than maybe a few attorneys, a few doctors, a few corrupt judges or politicians. We are at the brink of fixing to watch a catastrophe, and it's not a matter of may it happen or if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it happens. This is the part that the professional people are not talking about. And if you don't believe me, let's watch this one more time.
Exclusive interview.
Let's back up, and listen to what this guy says.
It's a bad situation, but the worst that's going to happen is people will lose their cars, which is really serious for a whole lot of people in this country. But it doesn't have the cascading effect on the national and global economy that the housing crisis did. I think that was what you're saying.
In theory, Congress could do something, but I wouldn't expect it. You know, we've had debates for a number of years about the growing scale of student loan debt and calls to do something about that. It's very difficult to get Congress to intercede on an event of this kind. It was very hard to get people mortgage relief in 2008, 2009.
Still controversial.
Yeah, so I would.
It's almost like they deliberately want us to fall through the cracks. They deliberately want us to fail. They deliberately want to ruin our credit status. They deliberately want us to be on the bottom of the food chain. That way, they can dominate and dictate to all the ones that's below them. Now, if this is not a type of tyranny that is forming over the American people's heads pertaining to a cloud of indignation, The transparency's there, folks.
Expect action on this, but I think it's definitely something that lawmakers are going to be watching and concerned about.
Yeah, and economists are going to be watching. John, thank
Lawmakers make laws in reference to their needs. Lawmakers does not make laws in reference to the poor man or the working man. We have figured this out.
Thanks very much, John.
We have figured this out. Right here.
Paid, and then you have this potential default of major institutions. I think this is a smaller scale problem, but it's a real problem for them. And when you have an economy, a recovery that's now 10 years in, it doesn't take a whole lot of misfortune to tip the balance and finally end that recovery. We know that the growth is slowing down now. Some people predict minimal growth in 2020 with Mark Zandi, the independent economist, thinks the chances are higher than 50-50 that we'll be in recession by the end of 2020. And statistics of this kind show some of the danger and could propel that forward.
But let's just
Could propel it forward. He's lying out his teeth right now. He is lying out his teeth right now, whoever this guy is. He should have said, it will propel it forward. They already know it's going to be propelled forward. You've got analysts and professionals